Good evening and welcome to the budget workshop for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. It is April 20th, 2021. It is 5:33. I will turn the meeting over to Ms. Phyllis Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor. Afternoon, Alderman, Vice Mayor. Tonight we'll begin our budget workshop discussing State Street Aid Fund. We have several funds to go through tonight, so we'll go ahead and get started with the State Street Aid. On the screen and in your packet you have is the revenues for State Street Aid, and the revenues are based off of mainly the state gasoline and motor fuel taxes. I've estimated those taxes to be about $1.2 million for the year. We'll earn a little bit of interest earnings, and that's pretty much all of the revenue stream for this fund. That will bring us to approximately about $1.2 million in revenues. The second page or second screen here is the expenses, and we basically have about 3 different types of expenses that hit this account. We have the street lighting, we have the repair and maintenance on the roads, which are mainly our paving projects that we have during the year, and Garland usually provides us with a list of those at the workshop or at the first reading. We have some bank service charges, and then we have a bond debt payment, principal and interest. Again, these are pretty standard expenses. The street lighting runs about $285. We have generally about $700,000 a year to do paving with, and then our bond payments we have a schedule for those, and they're coming to about $72,000 this year. So that gives us a total expense of $1,057,000 with $1.2 million in revenues, which gives us a little bit of surplus of about $142,000 that we can roll into the fund balance for the State Street Aid Fund. Any questions about State Street Aid? If not, I will roll on into our Senior Center Fund. Revenues mainly consist of the grant from Rutherford County, which is about $46,200 per year. The seniors have some activities, lunches and crafts, different type of activities they earn some revenue off of. We have the farmers market income. We do some fundraisers, and we also receive money from GNRC. Do a little fundraisers with the hot dog sales. The general fund transfers about $111,000 to the Senior Center Fund, and that's to cover wages for the 3 employees that are in the department. All of these revenues are pretty consistent every year. The county hasn't changed any, GNRC hasn't changed any. However, GNRC is giving us a little bit more this year due to COVID, but pretty much they'll go back to their normal 26.8 and 46.2 for the Rutherford County. As far as expenses, the first line is $111,156, and that covers the wages and benefits for the 3 employees. We have $800 scheduled for postage, and we have $6,500 for electricity, about $400 for water, $5,000 for their natural gas for their heat. Comcast is running about $1,750. We budgeted $3,000 for maintenance service, miscellaneous maintenance services, and then we have about $1,500 for the building, about $300 for meals and entertainment. I won't go down through all these. It doesn't look like any of the other expenses have changed very much. Again, we look at the trending year over year, and that gives us a total expense budget of about $158,906. We have that should leave us with about a surplus of about $31,625, which goes back into their fund balance. And I know there's gonna be some discussion about some small projects, that David will bring up at the, workshop Thursday night for capital improvements. And we'll discuss those on Thursday night. Anybody have any questions about the expenses or the revenues for the senior center? Okay, we'll move right along to the drug fund. Drug fund revenues consist of state courts, fines and fees, a little bit on impound fees, forfeitures, which is confiscated cash. And by the way, I took $50,000 cash yesterday to the bank that some unlucky person got confiscated. We don't always get to keep all of that, but we have to wait until it's actually awarded to us before we can count it as revenue. So we estimate probably our portion will be about $40,000 next year. And the general fund also transfers about $30,000 to this fund to help out with expenses. As far as on the expense side, we have employee education training, and that's mainly for the SWAT team. We have some memberships, line item 235, for the Tennessee Narcotics Association. Pretty much all the other expenses are about the same. We took travel down a little bit. We took the weapons, small items of equipment down just a little bit. Firearm supply, we took it down because it's getting hard to get some firearms and some bullets. Pretty much everything else is the same. That gives us a total budget of $78,100, which gives us a surplus of about $7,930, which of course goes back into the drug fund. Any questions about any of the expenses or the revenues for the drug fund? These are all expenses related strictly to drug-related operations. We have no questions. We will move right along to equitable sharing. Equitable sharing is where we work with federal arrest, federal, what you want to call it, Chip? Federal programs, federal agencies, and doing all kinds of tasks with them. We generally receive, we share whatever revenues is confiscated or awarded to us through the federal government. We should have to share that with other agencies that are involved in the various cases. We anticipate about $30,000 next year, and a little bit of interest earnings. And then as far as on the expense side, we anticipate spending about $15,000, and that's for the undercover operations. This is where our guys go out and do undercover work and pick up the bad guys and bring us in a little bit of money. So, any questions about equitable sharing, revenues or expenses? Okay, our next fund will be stormwater. On the revenue side, this consists of mainly of two income sources, and that is our residential stormwater fees and our non-residential stormwater fees. That's the biggest lump of revenues that we receive. As far as expensive, we have wages and salaries. We took those up about 3%. Pretty much all the other line items are basically about the same. I might have moved some up and down just a little bit, not much, which gives us a budget of $1.1 million.
Phyllis, what is 236, public relations with this department?
That is, Adam, you want to explain that one?
So that is all the stormwater events that we're required to do as part of our MS4 permit. So this year, that was our revegetating streams
the overall, when you take the revenues minus expenses for the year, we'll have about $164,000 that will go back into the fund balance. Any other questions about stormwater? All right, we will move into street capital. This is funded by the road impact fees and sidewalk deposits. We anticipate just a little over 500,000, about 410,000 for next year. As far as expenses, these are the projects that we currently will be budgeting for next year. That's our professional fees associated with the sidewalk and the Merciful Road project, Carruthers Road curve widenings, Sam Ridley connector design, the Blair Road West to Carruthers design, the South Water and the Blair intersection design, and Charter Place and Center Point signal and realignment. Those are the projects that we have. We had most of these in the budget for this year, so the ones we haven't exactly completed those, so we carried forward the expenses that we haven't completed, and that comes to a total of about 2.6 million. If we were to complete all of these projects next year, that would leave us probably with right around $1 million left in this fund.
And the Charter Place Center Point signal and realignment just went out to bid today. So we should be seeing that rolling along.
And we may adjust these numbers as we get better numbers if we get them before the first reading. Any questions about street capital projects? We'll have further discussions about projects Thursday night too. These are just some that we have to rebudget because we've already started them and we haven't completed. If we have no questions, I'll move on to parks capital projects. Again, this fund is only funded by parks impact fees and anything that's transferred over from general fund. Occasionally we have to transfer funds over to this fund to pay for the projects that are going, that we don't have funds for, because there's very little money in this fund. So we have about $35,000 that we anticipate in park impact fees. That's for the budget for 21-22, and we will be using about $295,000 of our fund balance, and that will cover the two projects that we have been working on and have been discussing in several meetings, and that's the Hurricane Creek Greenway Phase 2 and of course the Bark Park. And
I don't guess there's any way to know how this money will change with us raising impact fees just yet, will it?
yeah, no, not yet. Any other questions about capital projects, parks? Okay, if not, we'll move along to police impact fees. Again, this is another one that's, the revenue stream comes from police impact fees. We anticipate about $45,000. Of course, we've had the rate study. That number may change. Hopefully it will. And we have not budgeted for anything other than service charges. This is a fund that we've utilized this year in 2021 for police equipment. So therefore, the balance is pretty low at this point. We try to let it build back up before we spend any more out of it. So you won't see any spending in this fund probably for a year or two till we can build it back up. Any other questions about police impact? If not, we'll move on to the fire impact fund. Again, we're estimating about $20,000 in impact fees, and we're not going to budget anything until we get some funds built up into this fund. Any questions about fire impact? If not, we'll move right along to our 413 Water and Sewer Fund. For our revenues, we receive rent from Sprint, and I don't think it's called TowerCo anymore, but we receive rent for our cell tower usage to the tune of about $30,000 and $20,000. Of course, we have our water sales from utilities, and we have some miscellaneous revenue, which is, fire service and hydrant rental, inspection fees, backflow, disconnect fees, forfeits and penalties, installation charges, miscellaneous, and then we have our sewer charges from our utility billing, and then some additional fees that come along with the sewer inspection fees and penalties. We receive a little bit from recycling, a little bit from interest earnings, and you see that's dropping drastically, and that's due to the current economic situation where interest rates are not very, very good right now. We do receive irrigation tap fees. We receive water tap fees and sewer tap fees. And I haven't forecasted any major increases in these. I just kind of, look at what we've trended in the last couple of years. Increase it just a little bit because we know we're adding customers constantly. But overall, we lose some customers and we add some customers. So there's not a lot of changes that you'll see throughout the revenue stream.
Phyllis, on the rent with the Sprint tower, I noticed that kind of fluctuates a little bit. Is there a set amount, or how is that determined, that rent?
It's, to my knowledge, I believe, Bruce, isn't it based on customer?
Looks like it's going up every year just a little bit. There are automatic increases in that contract to where it goes up every year. It's based on a percentage. I don't recall what that is, but it's just contract terms with Sprint and with the other company as well.
Okay. And then the other question I had was tap fees. Those are still something we need to address as a whole, as a board. I know we've already discussed impact fees and got that modernized, but we still need to look at the tap fees from that study. Is that right, Bruce?
Yes, sir.
How much is a tap fee right now?
It's in the permit, but Steve, right off the top of my head, it's around $2,500, somewhere thereabout.
It also varies with the size tap that you get. And
And Phyllis, the $7 million for sewer service charges, that's what we pay Metro?
No, that's what we receive from billing customers.
And how much of that do we pay to Metro? Do we know?
We pay Metro about 2.3 million, somewhere, 2.2, 2 million, somewhere around that neighborhood.
But also in that, we have to include money to be able to maintain our system also, not just pay them, but to maintain ours.
Staff, equipment,
Yep.
infrastructure. Any other questions about the revenues? I don't mean to kind of glaze over them, but they're pretty much stay pretty consistent with the exception of water and sewer revenues. Okay, we'll move on to expenses. For water treatment plant, we have allocations that we move back and forth, and these allocation is basically for, like engineering does some work for the water treatment plant, HR does work for water treatment plant, admin does a little bit of work, so we try to distribute that to the different funds so that the general fund is not being hit with all of the cost of manpower when we have manpower in general fund that's actually doing some work for water sewer fund. For the water treatment plant, we estimate about $300,000 for electricity, $250 for water, about $6,000 for cell phone, or for phone service. We have audit fees of about $4,500. We always allocate some engineering dollars. We budget for a little bit of penalties, hoping that we don't have any, but we put some money in there just in case. Other professional services, the $1.7 million is what we pay Infomark for their service of maintaining our water treatment plant. And that goes up based on, that goes up every year, about 3 to 4%. They have a scale that they go by for our increases. Repair and maintenance service, we add about 10,000 in for budget for that. We allocate about 40,000 for any kind of building maintenance, $34,000 for the core for water storage, and we also add in additional 25,000 for chemicals, laboratory, and medical, and that's to cover basically to cover if the water treatment plant runs into a situation where they've exceeded their allotment from the contract. We haven't had that happen, but we always try to budget a little bit of money in there just in case. We have $80,000 in insurance that we pay for property and insurance. Depreciation, about $525,000, and then we have property taxes on the cell tower of about $1,500. So for the sewer fund, the budget, for the water treatment plant, the budget is $2.9 million. And I did want to ask, we have Kyle, you might can answer this, I'm not sure. We had put in the budget $25,000 for roll-up door replacement. Does anybody know if that's going to be done, or do we need to roll that into next year?
They basically have done some stuff that the roll-up doors right now are working, but we're still gonna look at that, so, probably still need to get with David on it and see if we need to do it or not.
Have you looked at that, David?
I think Aiken's door went out there. I called him back in the morning to see if he got a quote. I know they got them working, so I don't know if they put that on hold or not.
Okay.
You'll have to have doors added over. So we follow up in the morning.
Okay, just let me know. I just want to make sure if we need to rebudget, we can rebudget, but that money hasn't been spent this fiscal year.
And this is a good time to remind the board, we really need to be thinking about what we want to do with the water treatment plant. We have a contract that's coming up in about a year and a half, 2 years, and we need to determine, do we want to stay with Infomark? Do we want to put this out for rebid with more time so that other companies can bid to provide the same type of service, or does the city want to go and take over the water treatment plant again and run it itself? And so we need to really hash that out to a degree, because now we have the time. If we're going to start that process, whichever process it's going to be, it gives us plenty of time to start that at this point.
How
So,
did it go when the city used to run it?
That was before my time, Vice Mayor, now.
Bruce?
We had some success for a good portion of the time. The problem we ran into was staffing and keeping good qualified people there to run the plant. And then, we ran into some various issues and ran into some violations with the state. And that's really what led us to going with a private company to operate the plant on our behalf. I'm not saying it can't be done, because it certainly can. It's just, we would have to be sure to spend the money on employees, get good quality employees that would know how to operate the plant and do it the right way. And of course, we would have to also assume any responsibility for the violations that may come up due to the operation of the plant, which right now, a lot of that would fall on Infomark if there's something that they do that is determined to be a violation by the state. But obviously those are issues that we can look at and address if needed. And Kyle may have some more comments, but that's my initial response to that.
Now, with notices of violation, though, that falls, even though Infomark it may occur, it still falls on the city, though, whenever it's reported, when the state looks at it. They've got it listed down as against the city of Laverne.
Right, ultimately it is the city of Laverne. However, currently Infomark, if there are any fines or fees or penalties or whatnot, they would be responsible for paying those. And of course, they are responsible for responding to any violations and making sure those corrections are made under our oversight to make sure things are handled properly. So yes, it really does affect us in a way too, because it's our name that's on that plant.
How do you feel about that, Michael?
Let me just say, I think it would be a good thing for us to start looking toward the future, and possibly looking to take it back over. So I think we're ready to do that today. I know. I believe that, if they're having trouble finding certified operators, we're gonna have that same problem. But I do think at some point we need to start looking down the road at possibly making that back over ourselves. I really do.
At the same time, I say, if we do decide to outsource it to a third-party group, whether it's Infomark, whether it's any of the other companies that are out there, I do believe that we need to add some language to it about notices of violations, because over the decades, we've had several for various reasons. Yes, the ones that have fines or have notices, the companies pay for. The ones that don't, though, it's more of, they have no skin in the game. It's a notice of violation. It's still on the city. It's still our black eye, but there's nothing in it on them. And so I would argue that we would need to work into some type of contract with them that regardless of the notice of violation, whatever kind of fee there is. That would just be my thought.
I kind of agree with Mike as far as finding people, finding help. That would be another burden to whoever takes it over. And I know Bruce always cautions on the side of error. This ain't like axe throwing, but definitely got some good points. And if there was, and I didn't hear anything positive about what you just said, so.
In the long run, I don't know, if it would be a savings to the city or how much of a savings it might be to the city.
That was my next question, is how
Right
much?
now, there's no way to know, because like I said, I know Infomark has had some trouble getting good qualified people to come there to work, and we have a lot of trouble with a lot of our city positions as far as, getting good applicants. We do get some, fortunately, but, I think pay is a big part of that. We have the best benefits anywhere, but the pay, people look at the almighty dollar, and that's, primarily what they look at, it seems. So, whether we could save any money, I can't answer that question right now, because we've not worked up a draft budget. We've not put in there what the cost might be for staff, which of course is going to be your biggest part of that cost. It always is. Of course, chemicals and everything else that would be involved. We could certainly work towards that, but we're, like Michael said, we're not ready to do that right now.
And when you talk about staffing, the key point is knowing how many staff you need out there, because right now, Severn Trent or Infomark, let's say they have 10, we may think they need 12, we may think they need 8. That is a huge component of running the plant, is how many people do you need out there to begin with. And so we'll need to study that to be able to come up with a good amount that we'd even feel comfortable saying that this is probably what it would cost staffing wise. to be able
I
to.
totally agree with, Mayor Cole, but how do you, where do we even start that process? How do we,
Well, that's kind of what we're here to discuss is what do we want to do? Where, and we can discuss it here, and I know you and I have done quite a bit of the lion's share of the conversation for the board, so I'd love to hear from Graham and Megan and Dennis on their thoughts about this, because as a board, we have to figure out what the direction is to give to staff so they can start looking and figuring out to get us numbers.
My comment would be is, the good news is we have the time. So my suggestion would be to tackle both ways. One is to obviously start drafting out a new RFP for somebody to run it. At the same time, let's look at the costing in-house to do it ourselves. And let's have a look at both sides of it.
Bruce, how did you, how did you change from the city running it to Servant Trent?
Basically, an RFP was put out. This was back in 2006, I believe, and we just put out an RFP, and various companies responded, and our consultant, Griggs and Maloney, was a big help during that whole process. They kind of guided us through that process, and I'm sure that if we needed their help now, they would be willing to help us in that process again. Either way we wanted to go, whether it was take it back over ourselves or put out another request for proposals. We could certainly talk to our neighbors to see what kind of costs they have for running a plant. Now, obviously, there's going to be differences just in the type of plants that we run versus what other cities might have. But we could certainly start pulling some numbers together and try to, anytime we start a new department, it's always a guess for the first 2-3 years at least. And then we can, refine and adjust as needed, to determine exactly what those needs are. But I think the biggest expense right up front is obviously when it comes to the employees and their wages and like Kyle said, how many employees are we going to need to operate the plant, where it needs to be.
And whenever we bid it out and they came in and take over from us from the first time, they took over our staff that was currently out there. They brought in, a project manager and maybe one or two others, but they took control of the staff that was currently there, which if we take back over, that would be something you have to work out. Do we approach Infomark and offer a job to those folks, or are they even going to be amenable to that? That's what's got to be worked out, because starting off from zero, trying to hire 10 people that are qualified to do that, that's going to be a tall task to do.
Especially if they don't know the plan already.
Could we build the staff up to do it with us along with them, or does that have to be totally separate? Like, can we start building on it to gain a staff along with them, still running it?
We would have to work with them on making those arrangements.
Okay.
Of course, you would have some double payment essentially during that transition period. But theoretically, yeah, it could probably be done.
What happened to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think if you're looking at something like that, I think probably one of the things maybe to approach would be to discuss with Infomark maybe another 5-year contract. That way they're getting some benefit,
Right.
but knowing at the end of that 5 years, we take their staff over.
Gotcha.
So the whole time frame, they're still Infomark employees until that 5th year ends. That way we have a staff to take over, and that way we're not starting from scratch. There's no double paying. That would probably be the best means if the city's willing to, or wanting to take back over, is try to work out with them in the next contract to, at the end of it, we're assuming responsibility and taking back over.
And do you think that's something that they would be willing to do? Like,
We won't know till we ask.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point.
What happened to the staff that you had then? Did they leave the city?
No, they became Severn Trent employees at the time. They took all of our employees and transitioned them to their employees. And then over time made whatever changes they felt was necessary. But
So
they were
that-
they were no longer city employees.
That would kind of work the same way, maybe, if that's what you're thinking as far as the city, or,
Possibly, depending on what arrangements they have with their employees. I mean, I think some of their employees have a no-compete clause, like in a contract situation. I don't know specifically how they're set up, for all of their staff.
do you send out the RFPs?
Yes, the city would.
But you have to have the okay from us?
Typically, yes, we would. For something of this magnitude, yes.
Dennis, what's your thoughts?
Well, I was back on the council back in '06 when what really broke the camel's back was the pink water deal. That was, but one thing you look at, if the city took it over, if we had an issue over there, like we did with the pink water deal, we really had no avenue to go. If Infomark gets behind in a squeeze, they got onto places around the nation where, if they had one of their key people that maybe got killed or left suddenly, they can reach over here to Texas or Oklahoma and pull somebody down here. If we had the company and one of our key people, something happened, we lost them overnight or something, we would struggle. That's when we picked Silver and Trent back in. That was one of the deals that I liked, because they was nationwide. They had more than one company, because if they had some kind of issue, they could pull from. And I think they have a few years back, they had someone to quit, and they had to bring somebody from Texas in. The city probably wouldn't have that luxury, but,
Yes, they do have lots of resources located all around the country in different areas. And of course, they have more of a hierarchy than what we have, to rely on. So that is very true.
if the city had it, our butts would be on the burner, and if you got a problem like the pink water deal, Facebook goes crazy, the media go crazy, it's an ugly deal, and sometimes it's not a quick fix. With Intermark, they can pull somebody from probably overnight, fly somebody in from Texas. That's, I guess, my intake on it.
So do we, as a council, do we vote to see at some point if we're not happy with them, or if we're wanting to go forward? I guess
Well, we have a contract with them that expires. So if we do nothing with that contract, it just expires. We try to proactively rebid that out beforehand. I believe the last time that we rebid it out, pretty much at that point it was Severn and Trent were the only ones that qualified on that bid. There was at least one company asking for more time. The thought is this time to rebid it out, if we're going to rebid it out, give them significant time, more than last time. That way you can have multiple groups bidding. And I actually like Graham Coates' idea of looking at both options, letting that be presented to the board, because we can do a request for bids, and we can put together that bid packet for, what we need, let them bid. At the same time, put together what it would take for the city to run it, and then have that presented to the board, and then the board ultimately would have to vote, because we either have to do a new contract, whether it's with Infomark or any other groups, or decide to run it ourselves. But this would give it ample time. It would give everyone the opportunity to have a say in it, and it would go from there.
well, I can say out loud now, I don't like the idea of the city doing it, not from what I've heard. But in your RFP, we're not just looking for prices, I'm assuming.
Right.
We're looking for other things as well.
You want what's best for the city, not necessarily just the dollar sign.
It's the total amount. So they go through how many people they will staff, you know, what services they pay for, what they don't, and we're able to make a decision there as a body and decide what we think would be best for the city.
It's just like any other bid. You don't necessarily have to take the lowest bid, you need to take the best bid for the city.
So does one of us need to send you an email and say, hey, can we get this on the agenda, and then bring it up at a board meeting, and then we vote on it for you to do your RFP thing, and is that how that works?
At some point in the near future, yes, sir, we would need to put that on the agenda. How it gets put on the agenda could be any one of the members request it, and as long as the mayor's okay with leaving it on the agenda, you know, it would go before the council.
Bruce, when is the contract up?
It expires February of 2023. It's
I
about
like
a year and a
the,
half.
I like the idea of, as Alderman Coates says, getting ahead of the curve on this. I like that.
Yep, and that's the point of bringing it up here and now, because we still have plenty of time. And we can start that whole process and see what we get, and again, we can make a decision.
The other thing, relating back to what Bruce said, if we did try to take it back ourselves, is one is the salaries to at least match or compare to what other people are doing. But also for this board member is the benefits for health are very good, but also, as we found out, the retirement is very important to people. So that plays into the fact too. If you've got the best, as Bruce said, or certainly one of the uppermost for medical, and we have the same thing for retirement, and you pay them a good salary, that's just a great combination. It's a trifecta.
Right.
But didn't they have that same thing back in '06?
Benefit-wise, there's probably not a lot of difference between now and then. Of course, you know, wages are considerably higher now than they were 15 years ago. But wages, you know, I mean, benefits-wise, I'm sorry, the medical was probably similar. Retirement was, I think, is the same as it was at that point as well. So, you know, some of those haven't changed a lot. Of course, you know, healthcare costs have gone up, so it's kind of a bigger benefit now than it was back then. But, you know, as far as what the employees would have to pay, as far as, you know, co-pays and deductibles, that's pretty much stayed the same.
I think Michael said it pretty good. You know, the city's not ready right now, maybe down the road. If I can steal a phrase from my uncle, he always said, don't never put the wagon in front of the horse. And I think, Michael, you know, it's something that we're not prepared to do now. But, you know, in the next 5 years, it might be a reality, you know, but we need to go into it slowly, and because the water treatment plant is too important to make hasty decisions.
Well,
What do you think about it, Randolph?
I have no dog in that fight.
Well, you won't get no help from that corner, will you?
Well, Bruce, I will go ahead and save Vice Mayor No the effort and say that on a future agenda, go ahead and put on there both options for us so that we can basically go from there with it.
Okay, well, if it's all right with all of you, I'll plan for that for the June meeting. That gives us some time to put some numbers and whatnot together, and what we think the process could be, so that gives us a little time to put all of that together.
Now, not only will we get to see this RFP, those folks will be here before, so we can ask questions.
We could do that, yes, sir.
All right.
Okay.
I mean, I'm always up for a better deal, but from what I'm hearing, I don't like the city doing it.
Well, Ms. Phyllis, I'm done hijacking this section.
That's fine. Our
That
next,
was a good thing, huh?
our next department is the sewer maintenance department. We've increased the wages and benefits by 3%.
Where'd we go to here, Phyllis? I'm lost.
Sewer,
Sewer.
Okay, I got you.
Maintenance.
Go ahead, sorry.
it's okay. Electricity increased about 4,000. Increased the sewer budget, which is the metro fees, about 200,000. Just kind of looking down there, and that's basically, all the changes we made to this department, which gives it a budget about 4.9 million. Most of the line items stayed about the same as they did the previous year, based on history.
Phyllis, has Nashville, has there been any talk from them on any rate increases?
Generally, they have one every October the 1st, and I always build, about a 3% into our budget to cover their increases. Their increases run anywhere from 1 to about 3%. We're still paying on capital from years past, so we try to cover any increases that they pass on to us. Any other questions on sewer maintenance? If not, we'll move on down to our water maintenance. Again, we have our wages that have been increased by 3%. We did increase our education and training substantially to maybe, this may be an error. Mike, did we need? That's an error? Okay.
We did increase it to
6,000, not 60,000.
Padding that budget a little bit, Mike.
Yeah.
Get a whole lot of training for that.
Yeah. Membership registration fees, did increase that by 7,000. There's some TAUD and some additional training that memberships that Mike has asked for. Electricity kept about the same. Going down through here, I'm just looking for any major changes. We did decrease the repair and maintenance. I think we moved some things from one line item to another on this one. Yeah. Yeah, we moved the meters to operating supplies. Increased our depreciation a little bit. And generally, our depreciation, this, of course, you know what depreciation is. It's where we add assets, and this is the value of the asset spread out over however many years the asset's being depreciated. I did increase the fuel about 5,000. Just look at where we're trending this year. Not seeing any other major changes. That gives us a budget of 2.8 million, which is pretty close to where we were, pretty close to what we budgeted last year, minus that 95 that we had in there for some vehicles. Any questions about water maintenance? Our next section is water billing and collections. Pretty much on this one, we increased the wages by 3% again. Increased Fox collection fees. We increased that to about 12,000. I'm not really sure because, well, look at the trending from the previous year. And they have been doing a lot of collections for us. I don't quite think we'll spend 12,000 with them, but we did spend about 16,000. They collected, that was their fees for the collections for last year, and I think that's why I kind of hit a medium point there. I really don't think we'll go up to 12,000, but may need to change some there. Pretty much that's about it. I mean, depreciation, I did take it down because we're not purchasing anything, and some of our assets are being fully depreciated, so it gives us a budget of $731,899. Any questions about utility billing or water billing and collections? And the last little section is associated with our bonds. We do budget for the interest on bonded debt. We don't budget for the principal. That's just a water sewer accounting thing. And we also budget for bad debt expense of about $200,000. We feel like with us now, I guess we can talk about now, we are in the process of getting our utility billing caught up. Letters will be going out during the month of May explaining, what we're doing, and what we're doing is, we're billing, when we do the June billing, we'll be doing consumption for May. June the billing, we're doing, from probably sometime in April to sometime the 1st of June, probably the end of April to the 1st of June. So their June bill will be more than normal, but it will only be the increase, it will only be increased by the consumption for the additional time period. We feel like by getting, another good benefit of getting us caught up in billing, we feel like with us being caught up in billing, we're going to have less chance of customers with bad debts and less debt that we have to turn over to collection agencies, because we don't have that time gap where we bill a customer after they've moved, 30 days after they've moved, we're still sending them a bill. So we won't have that time period where they're still getting a bill, 1 or 2 bills after they moved, and it's very confusing, especially if they get 2 bills after they've moved, and by the time they get the second one, they just say, I've been gone for 2 months, this can't be right, I'm throwing it away, so they just don't pay it, and then we're stuck with the bad debt for write-offs eventually. So we're hoping that this, getting the billing caught up will also help with the bad debt.
We're not doing just letters also, and we'll be doing some social media stuff, and Jerry will have some items on Channel 3 as well. This way, we're trying to tackle it with as many sources as possible.
Yeah. And we won't be doing disconnects or penalties, you know, probably for at least a month or 2 to give everybody time to get that larger bill caught up. But, you know, they got to remember, they're basically skipping, they're not going to be paying a bill in the month of May, but when they get their June bill, it's going to cover more days in a longer period. So the letters will go out. I believe Allison said that on the week that the cycle would have normally been billed, instead of sending a bill, she's sending the letter. So that will happen during the month of May, probably 1 cycle per week to every customer. And then with the communication via social media and our Channel 3, we hope to get that communicated. It's not something that's pretty, and it's not something we, you know, are, you know, just trying to penalize anybody with. It's just a matter of our technology has given us the capability of being more efficient, and we need to take advantage of it. With all of our system upgrade that we're fixing to go through, it's just needs to be done.
This also helps with our water loss as well. Is that right?
Yes, it will, because we'll be able to catch it quicker if we have any large consumptions, or if we have anybody that's not being billed. We'll be able to review that in a quicker mode and be able to address it quicker than waiting a couple months down the road. With that being said, that's the last of tonight's budget funds and departments.
That's it?
That's it for tonight.
Any other questions about what we've discussed tonight?
Mayor, you had asked earlier about the tap fees. For residential, the tap fee for water is $500, and for sewer, it's $1,850.
How much?
$1,850. That's what the current rates are for residential.
Do we know anything about our neighbors' charges?
I don't read off.
I don't have it off the top of my head. We did a study call.
I think,
Put some numbers together. Got a bunch of stuff.
Well, the impact fees are actually in the study that Adam
Yeah.
had done with it.
Kyle, isn't?
With the tap fees and the impact fees is all together. So the tap fees, we do have a, you know, somewhat of a suggested amount to go off of based on what the impact fee study said. And
Kyle,
plus,
if I'm not mistaken, on the Portico place, wasn't the sewer tap fee gonna be 2,400?
It's 2,400.
yeah, 2,400, yeah,
Smyrna's 2,400
for just sewer.
for just sewer, and we're 1,850.
It's all, you know, setting up here, it's always nice when the community starts talking stuff that you can compare apples to apples instead of, you know, if they have a question, you got something to talk about.
But
I
the other thing we're gonna do is not just the, tap fees, it's looking at all fees. That's one thing we need to update the code. That's what we was talking about, of having a fee schedule. You know, when we was discussing the impact fees, y'all wanted to look at that yearly. So we was talking about doing a fee schedule to where the board, whenever they adopt the budget, would also be approving the fee schedule for that fiscal year. Of course, that's not gonna be something we'll have ready for this year, but I'm hoping by the time next budget cycle rolls around, we'll be able to have a lot of these fees taken out of the municipal code. That way y'all can adopt and vote on this yearly. That way if something has been an issue or somebody else changes something, you know, like a rezoning application fee, if Smyrna changes it and it's, now we're low end of the totem pole, you know, it's $1,000 cheaper to do it here, the very next fiscal year, y'all can, I mean, we can do it sooner if you wanted. If not, at least during the budget cycle, you can adjust that.
And Steve, that's something we talked about whenever we went through and looked at the impact fees. That way, it's something that's in front of us, regardless of whether it's us or anybody else. It's in front of them every year. There's no more of this, well, we didn't really think of it, or we forgot about it. It's in their face to see and approve every single year. And so if they want to adjust the impact fees right then, they can adjust the impact fees. They want to adjust a permit for a pool, they can adjust that. There's all of these different options right there in front of them, but there's no more of this, well, we didn't think about it.
I got you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, we'll be back here Thursday, 5:30. Meeting adjourned.